Welcome back to the show. We have a fantastic episode for you today. We are moving into, we're going to go way, way back into the past. We're moving into the realm of the reasons why we may feel compelled to eat the way that we do sometimes and how we might be able to rewire our brains around food. My guest today is a world-renowned speaker in this area. He is the founder of the WildFit program, and he is also happens to be one of the most entertaining speakers I've ever spent time around. I just had the pleasure of doing a 2-day session with him outside of Ottawa, which is near where I live. And he delivers in person just as he does on the camera. So I think you're going to really enjoy the conversation for a lot of different reasons. Of course, before we jump into that, we are going to thank our sponsors who make our podcast possible. I want to thank you guys. And of course, if you want to connect with me, then the way to do that is to go to Instagram at Natalie Nidham or head over to my website, natnidham.com. And that is where you can sign up for the newsletter and or check out the communities that I host and where you might be able to join up if that's something that is speaking to you at this time. All right, let's thank a couple of sponsors, talk a little bit about the episode, and then jump right in. You've probably heard that your gut controls pretty much everything in your world. Your digestion, your immunity, energy, even your weight. But every single day, it's under attack from processed foods, stress, and toxins. And it turns out that most probiotics are a complete waste of money. Up to 99% die in your stomach before they even reach your gut because they cannot survive the stomach acid. And this is why Just Thrive Probiotic is different, and it's what I use. It's clinically proven to arrive 100% alive and even turns your gut into an antioxidant powerhouse, protecting your health from the inside out. That means better digestion, healthy immunity, more energy, and easy weight management. I mean, we've just ticked off a lot of big boxes here. So you can choose from capsules or delicious berry gummies. You guys know how I feel about gummies. I love them. Your whole family can benefit from them. Now, all you have to do to try them out for yourself is visit justthrivehealth.com and use promo code NAT20 for 20% off your first 90-day bottle. Now, don't forget to check out all their other all-natural, clinically proven products as well, like Just Calm, Focus and Memory, Gluten Away, and many more. Now, once again, that's justthrivehealth.com, promo code NAT20. If you've ever stood in front of the fridge wondering why you're craving something you don't even like anymore, and really, who hasn't, this episode might just help you to understand why that is and how to rewire your brain. My guest today is Eric Edmeads, a globally recognized health expert, entrepreneur, and the creator of WildFit, a transformational health program rooted in evolutionary nutrition. We talk about how your body's cravings aren't broken. They're just responding to the modern food environment in all the wrong ways. Eric also shares the idea of metabolic seasons, why we seem to be eternally stuck in eternal fall, and how cracking the psychology of food might be the biggest unlock for lasting health. If you're interested in looking into some of the resources from WildFit, we will include a couple of links in the show notes for you, so make sure to check those out. I thought I knew what good honey tasted like until I tried Manukora. This isn't your average squeeze bottle stuff. It's thick, creamy, rich, and packed with health-supporting compounds. I used to drizzle regular honey, even sometimes raw honey, into my tea or over yogurt, but it never did much beyond tasting sweet. Manukora, it's like a spoonful of wellness. I take a heaping teaspoon every morning straight from the jar and let it just melt in my mouth. It coats my throat, tastes amazing, and it's a pretty decadent start to the day. I actually love it right before I'm heading out to the gym. What makes Manukora different is where it comes from. Remote forests in New Zealand, where bees collect nectar from the native Manuka tea tree. That nectar is naturally rich in antibacterial compounds like MGO, plus antioxidants and prebiotics that support immunity and gut health. Now, it's easier than ever to try Manukora honey. Head over to manukora.com/nat to save up to 31%, plus get $25 worth of free gifts with the starter kit. You'll get an MGO 850 plus Manuka honey jar, 5 travel sticks, a wooden spoon, and a guidebook. That's manukora.com/nat to save 31%, plus get $25 worth of free gifts. Eric Edmeads, welcome to the podcast. You are the guest I did not know I could not wait to have on the podcast. Welcome.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I'm really glad to be here too.
The world works in funny ways. And sometimes all it takes is a crazy introduction by one person. And the next thing you know, you're like, wow, how are you not on my radar? So here we are. Eric, you've had like this, like literally the fact you weren't on my radar is a little shocking. So you're this globally recognized entrepreneur. You're a health expert. You're the creator of this WildFit program, which is wildly successful. You know, like this is literally a transformation program rooted in evolutionary nutrition. How did you create this? Like, where did this come from? Because it's a very different approach. We're going to get into some of it in a little while, but what brought you to create this?
You know, it happened slowly and then really quickly. And what I mean is that, my great-grandfather found the oldest Homo sapiens skull in history. And so in my house, there was a lot of conversation about ancestral living. And I used to, I held a cast of this skull in my hand as a little boy of 12 in the National Museum where it's housed. And there's also, they also have one at the National Museum, at the Natural History Museum in New York, which I've gone to visit.
Yeah.
And I've held that skull in my hand and from the age of 12, daydreamed about what life must have been like for that person. And that brings up all kinds of interesting inquiry. Like, we're talking about a person that was alive 259,000 years ago. There are 2 bite marks in the skull, or I should say 2 tooth marks in the skull. And what we don't know is whether those tooth marks were cause of death or, after death. But
right.
It still begs a bunch of questions. Like, what was life like? What did they have for breakfast? How did they mate? How did they raise their children? And like, if you can imagine, these are odd questions to be asking at the age of 12, but I was. Mm-hmm. And then separately, I went through a big health renaissance. I was 21 years old and I was sick in really terrible ways. I'm not talking terminal or anything, but I just mean I was suffering. I was on a bunch of medications. I had digestive problems. I had constant and chronic throat and nasal and sinus infections. I had cystic acne. I was in pain all the time. I was in pain so regularly that I didn't even know I was in pain.
You normalized it.
Yeah. I completely normalized it. And then I went to a Tony Robbins seminar, funny enough. And,
and that man keeps coming up.
Yeah. And I really thought I was there to learn about sales and communication. But on the last day, he started talking about food, and a few things he said stuck with me. And so I went home and I started thinking about food and my relationship to food. And I did a 30-day experiment. And 30 days later, I had lost 35 pounds. I was 21. So you want to think about where I was headed, right? Wow. And I said, people always ask me for before and after pictures. I wouldn't let people take pictures of me. No. I don't have any of those.
I would think a big chunk of that would have been inflammation.
Oh yeah.
As well.
Yeah. Like no question. You don't lose 35 pounds of fat that fast. You lose infection. But to your point, my sinus infections were gone. My throat infections were gone. My digestive problems were gone. Whatever autoimmune condition was going on in my digestive system, undiagnosed at that stage, the ADHD that I was always living with and problems with focus and gone. And all the medications I was on, gone. And my doctor had ordered me to have a tonsillectomy, which they always talk about as being this really basic surgery. And I'm like, I don't know if you're blaming God or Darwin here, but those tonsils are there for a reason. Let's not be cutting those things out. Mm-hmm. And it's funny enough, as I was exploring that surgery, I was already starting to ask questions about evolutionary biology. And I was talking to my dad one day, who's probably one of the most knowledgeable people in the world on human history. And he wrote the book Megafauna, which is, according to Paul Martin, it was the single best treatment of human history ever written. He said he was jealous he hadn't written the book himself. So of course I grew up with that too, by the way. And then one day my dad and I are out for a run in Johannesburg, and they're selling like corn on the side, like barbecued corn on the side. And he goes, "Do you want one?" I go, No, I have a really terrible sore throat. And he goes, "Oh, that's funny. When I have a sore throat, I like to have something to eat. It sort of scratches the itchiness or something like that." And I said, "Well, I bet you don't have tonsils then." And he goes, "No, you're right. I don't." And I said, "You see, let me tell you what I think tonsils are for. I said, quite aside from being part of the lymphatic system, I think that tonsils are there to discourage eating when you're fighting an infection, to force you to fast. And he's like, Eric, evolution can't answer everything. And I'm going, play it out with me. You have a population of people who they get an infection, their tonsils swell up to the golf ball size where it's difficult for them to swallow anything other than water, forces them into a 3 or 4 day fast. Do they not heal more quickly than the others? Of course they do. Do they not cleanse more quickly than the other? Yeah, of course they do. So would they not be more successful in passing on their genetic information? Of course they would. And so suddenly we arrived together at the conclusion that tonsils swelling up like that are a design or a protection against eating. And so you can see my interest in evolutionary biology and then my interest in nutrition started to collide with each other pretty heavily.
No kidding.
In 1990, I don't know, like 93 or so, 1992, I wrote an essay called The Human Diet. And this was spurred on by the thought process that the word diet has been hijacked. And this is not a new idea now, but you can imagine it was a pretty new idea in 1992. And that is that if David Attenborough uses the word diet, what he means is the lifestyle of the animal. Right?
Yeah, like what they eat.
Yeah.
Period.
Oxodonta africana. You know, the African elephant eats 200 kilograms of grass and bark and blah, 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 and drinks 70 liters of water. That's its diet. Like the elephant doesn't have a temporary diet to fit into a certain outfit for a special occasion, right? And so I wrote this little article suggesting that that the word diet means something and that every species has one. And I read an article by S. Boyd Eaton, he wrote that back in like the mid 80s. And I would say to some degree, he might be the original paleo, the original ancestral diet guy. He might be the guy. And really? I was the guy as far as I was concerned, because I originated the thought. I originated the thought and started digging into it. That's how I found his article. And by the way, I interviewed Lauren Cordain some years ago and asked him what gave him the idea. Because when the paleo diet came out, I have to tell you something. I was split opinion on this. I was like, I'm a kid. I'm 22 or 3 years old. I feel super vindicated by the book, but I feel robbed. I feel totally robbed. And so I asked him what gave him the idea. And he said, same article, S. Boyd Eaton, 1984, 1985. And there it was.
Well, it's inspiration, right? Like we move through, we hit touch points that guide us, or maybe we're more like a pinball and we can go in many different directions, but we choose the direction we go from each one of these guideposts, if you will. And as it turns out, you and Lauren Cordain went the same way, only he was older than you and established and was able to
and he had an agent and stuff.
Also, he had an agent, right?
And by the way, I'm a big fan. He did phenomenal work, and frankly, he paved the road. He made it. Mm-hmm. It would have been much harder. Like honestly, when his book came out, I could go to people and go, "I told you." Like, look, and he'd done the research, and he had academic training that I didn't have. So it really, I mean, as much as there was a little human ego issue there, I really was grateful. But
he took a lot of abuse too.
He did.
Right?
He took a lot.
I mean, he took a massive amount of these guys that push these ideas out first.
Yeah.
Get hammered. I mean, some of them get destroyed.
Even I did in my own small way. Even with the work he did, I would, even my dad, as smart as he was, even he pushed back on all this stuff. He came to me one day, and I'm talking a decade before Stephen Gundry, right? Just to put this in perspective. My dad comes to me one day, he goes, "I found an inconsistency in your methodology." And I go, "What is it?" "I'm always wanting to learn. I'm always wanting to grow. What's this inconsistency?" And he goes, "Well, you tell people that because we have a longer evolved relationship with old world plants, that they are easier for us and likely better for us. And you say that we should avoid new world plants because we haven't had." I go, "Yes, what's wrong with that?" And he goes, "Nothing's wrong with that." He goes, "I agree with that. But then why is it that you advocate for eating new world animals?"
Well, because we can't get our hands on old world animals.
Well, now that's one answer, but it's also not entirely true. I mean, a cow is definitely a new world animal bred from an old world animal, an oryx. Right. But I'm talking about bison. He says, you can get African buffalo. Why are you advocating for North American bison? And immediately I said this to him. And again, this is a decade before Plant Paradox. I said to my dad, well, you have to imagine that every food other than fruit, which is begging to be eaten in many cases, every other food is trying not to be eaten and digested. They're fighting. Animals fight externally. They fight with teeth and claws and size and herd size and strength and speed and camouflage. Occasionally they fight biochemically. Occasionally, like the water buck has an oil in its fur that allows it, and the capybara, I think, has it as well. And they can go into the water, and then the crocodiles or alligators won't go after them. And, we have skunks. So there's some biochemical defense, but mostly animals defend themselves with, external physical defenses. Plants entirely, they have some physical defenses, thorns, you could argue. There are seeds that are thorns and leaves that are thorns, and there are thorns that are thorns, but plants defend themselves biochemically. And I said, so if we eat a plant for the very first time, those defense mechanisms are going to hit us. And I won my dad over that day. He's like, okay, I can't fault the logic, right? And that was like the first time I'd expressed to him that I thought we need to be careful about plants.
And there are plenty of civilizations that have figured out ways to make plants more digestible. Like if you look at the Weston A. Price Foundation, and when you're going back to why did my grandmother soak those chickpeas overnight and change the water 500 times? The cool thing is the human animal or the human species is nothing if not innovative and figures out ways to make things edible, and probably originally more out of necessity than anything else. Because plants may have biochemical defenses, but they're a hell of a lot easier and less dangerous to catch than an animal.
So this is where things get pretty fascinating.
Okay.
They really do. And so in one of my books, The Evolution Gap, I'm talking extensively about something called evolutionary mismatch. And the basic idea of evolutionary mismatch is that our capacity for innovation has outstripped our ability to genetically evolve. We innovate much more quickly than our genes can respond. One good example of this would be, I can take one look at you and figure out you're from mid to Southern Europe, genetically speaking, roughly speaking.
Well, maybe. Maybe I'm technically, I originate from Spain. I originate from Spain, but
likely your great grandparents also originated from that rough region. How can I tell that? Because of your eye color and your skin color and your hair color. Your ancestors evolved the ideal melanin level for the level of sunlight that you need to have. Too much sunlight is bad. Too little sunlight is also bad. So you evolved the sweet spot. That's evolution. The gap is where you now move to Tromsø, Norway, and you start having seasonal affective disorder or rickets because you're not getting enough sunlight, or you move to Eritrea and you burn to a crisp and get skin cancer. That's the gap. The gap is when we use technology to move, literally or figuratively, too far away from our evolution. And so this issue about the way we handle food prep and so on kind of fits into that. So you're right. We now know that we can take chickpeas, which are, let's say, not ideal to eat raw. And then
try eating them raw. Good luck with that.
It's not so good, right? So we now know that we can use technology to eat them. What I would argue is that does not make them good for us necessarily. It just makes them not that bad. Same with potatoes. I don't think there's anything redeeming about white potatoes. And frankly, nobody really likes them. A few people that grew up in the Soviet Union were conditioned, but what people like is salt and fat. They want their baked potato. They want their fried potato. 100%. They want their potato salad. But nobody normally wants to just eat a raw potato, right? But we've developed ways of doing that. And I'm sure you've run into this. You take somebody who's having migraines and take them off potatoes, 60-70% of the time, migraines are gone. The alkaloids that are in the potatoes, even though you've cooked them, even though you've soaked out the toxins, is still not ideal. So I think we can use these, say, technological advancements to make things more edible and more enjoyable, but that doesn't mean we should make them staple.
I love my meat. I believe we're obligate omnivores, and obligate because for practical reasons. Right? I don't think from an evolutionary perspective, too many people were good enough hunters and had a good enough constant supply of meat that they could afford to only eat meat. So they kind of had to figure out ways to feed themselves in between the kills.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way
don't you think that's that's just my, and that's not from deep study. That's just my rational thought process saying, there was no grocery store there. There's no guarantee that the hunters of the tribe are necessarily going to be able to get their hands on the next big animal. So in the meantime, people are going to forage and get what they can to sustain themselves So
let's dial this back to very early humans, say 6-7 million years ago, mostly forest dwelling at that stage. Africa is largely jungle and forest from Cape Town to Cairo because the polar caps at that stage are not frozen. And so there's a lot of water in the planet. And at that stage, we would have been eating a lot of fruit almost year round because there would have been seasonal fruits going around and lots of vegetables. And then we would have been opportunistic hunters, probably much like chimpanzees and bonobos today. Then as the polar caps start freezing up, Africa starts to dry out. You get these big savannas and grasslands and even deserts opening up, the Kalahari, the Sahara, the Kalahari, and so on. And so then some of those animals are now forced to make their way out onto the savanna. Cats, for example, were pushed on the savanna and became family cats. Lions are the only cats that live in families. And, early humans are pushed out on the savanna. They better learn how to stand up tall, and they got to change their hunting patterns and so on. And the black rhino gets pushed out onto the savanna and has to evolve and become a grass eater. And that's the white rhino. It's twice the size of a black rhino. But it took a long, long time for all of that to happen. And what I would suggest is that our hunting patterns changed a great deal when we no longer had access to regular forest foods, right? Like we became savanna animals. Now, this is where it gets interesting. This idea that, like you said, okay, we might not have been good enough, or we might not have been effective enough or lucky enough to hunt so prolifically. This is so interesting. In Africa, why is it that humans wiped out all of the megafauna in North America? Why did they wipe out all the megafauna in Australia? Why did they wipe out basically all the megafauna in Europe? But somehow megafauna survived in Africa. It makes no sense because humans are from Africa. You think that's the first ones we wiped out. But the difference is those animals evolved alongside us. So they're bloody smart. Like a lion knows what you are. They say don't get out of your car in the park, and you shouldn't. You're in a game reserve. You shouldn't. It's stupid. It's dangerous. But I guarantee you 9 times out of 10, you open the door and step out of your car, the lions run. They're terrified of bipedal hunters. They know what we are. The minute if you have a Maasai in your car, the lions won't even come near your car because they still hunt. Like they know what a bipedal hunter is. So in Africa, you're right. Their hunting would have been, let's say, challenging because the animals were smarter, but we still pushed all the giant tortoises into extinction, all the saber-toothed cats, all the other elephant species were down to 2. There were probably 11 or 12. So we weren't that ineffective as hunters. In fact, African wild dogs are 90% effective. They're the most effective. They and wolves are about the most effective hunters there are. We would have been probably as effective as them, if not more, because we started bringing technology to the game.
Well, and we would have been effective because that's the eating of meat is what triggered the explosion in growth in our brain.
Yeah, I think
we didn't get super smart on grass.
That's right. So to really talk about meat eating properly, I think what's great is to dial the clock back about 6 or 7 million years. Like let's go way back. We know, for example, that chimpanzees and bonobos, our closest living relatives, are very effective hunters. I would not want to be hunted by chimpanzees. We think lions use strategy. No, they're accidentally really good hunters. Chimpanzees plan their hunts and they send one group over. I mean, it's incredible. And that's how it used to be. But living in the forest, they had prolific use of vegetables and fruits that grew all year round. They weren't subjected. They lived in the tropical areas, and Africa was largely jungle and forest during that time. As the polar caps started freezing up at the beginning of the current ice age that we're in now, the Africa starts opening up and you get these big savannas and deserts and, Kalahari, Sahara, and so on opening up. And some of those primates were kind of forced to go and make a living on the savanna. Equally, some cats were forced to go, like leopards were forced to go out onto the savanna, but the splotchy coloring didn't work as well there. So they started becoming a little bit more tawny colored. They realized that living solo didn't work so well out there in the grasslands. So they started living in families. Humans realized if you're going to live in the grass, you got to stand up. And when I say realized, I'm romanticizing evolution here a little.
Oh yeah, no, this is evolution. Yeah. This is a lot of dead people, and the guy that can kind of do something that the other guys can't. Yeah. Gets to breed and move on to the next generation.
And so out there's no access to this ready supply of fruit anymore. There's no access to ready supply of vegetables. You're living in the grasslands. And so we hunting becomes a bigger and bigger part of our lives at that point. And it becomes, sort of an interesting back and forth thing. It's like the more of these beautiful proteins and fats we get, the greater capacity for intelligence we're developing. The more intelligence we're developing, the more size we're developing, the better hunters we're becoming, and so on. And now where this gets really interesting is that if you look at megafauna extinction, the extinction of super big animals, because those are the first animals to go. Whenever humans arrive somewhere, the big animals go first. They're easy to spot, they're easy to track. And their economic
the herbivores at this point, right?
Sorry?
Like we were talking about the plant-eating prey animals.
Yeah, prey animals. Okay. But every time you push them into extinction, you lose their carnivore predators.
Oh yeah, you're losing the prey.
Long before we pushed elephants, most of the African elephants into extinction, we pushed the saber-toothed cats into extinction because they were competing with us. So it's also the predators. But where this gets really fascinating is it raises a question of why is it that Africa still has at least 2 elephant species? It still has hippos. It has rhinos. Like, yeah, they're all at the brink, but why are they still there? And they're gone from the Americas that used to have 11 or 12 elephant species, woolly rhinos, short-faced bears, dire wolves, ground sloths that lived in South America the size of almost hippos. Where are they? Why didn't they make it? Why did the African ones survive? And the answer, I think, is at least the answer that I believe that is compelling. And that is that we evolved in Africa and the animals evolved alongside us. So as we became better and better hunters, they became better and better at avoiding us. And that's why to this day, I am not afraid of African lions. I'm not. I'm terrified of grizzlies. Grizzlies scare me. You're walking around Mendocino County, you're walking around Calgary, Alberta, and you're out in the mountains. Do not mess around. Grizzlies, they just see you as meat with no hairballs. Like they're in. Yeah. A lion sees you as a bipedal hunter that has been obliterating them for hundreds of thousands of years. They're terrified of you. I have many times, I was walking in a river once with my dad. We came down the riverbank, 14 lions in a dry river, 14 lions on the other side. Yeah, we were nervous about that. But if they were grizzlies, I'd have been terrified. Grizzlies aren't afraid of us. If a grizzly is afraid of you, it learned it in its lifetime. A lion is genetically afraid of you. So now why this all matters is that when humans were in Africa, there would have been to some degree a hunter-prey balance that was developing. To your point earlier, meat might not have been all that readily available because the animals were getting harder and harder to hunt. And as we pushed more and more of them into extinction, it got harder and harder. But when we broke out of Africa, we arrived in land masses that had 2 really distinctive features that most people don't think about. The one is we were not genetically matched with any of the plants there. Herbivores cannot migrate around the planet in the same way, not in the same speed. Because you see, for a herbivore to leave Africa and end up in England, it would take millions of years because it would have to evolve to eat the plants in each of the locations that it went to. You can't take an African elephant, throw it in the Thames River and hope that it can eat. It can't do that. Yeah. But carnivores can. Carnivores can move to a new place and eat the meat. And so each place we went to, we had that issue to deal with, that the plants were really tough for us there. And unless we brought some along with us, which I'm sure also happened. But then also the animals in each of these new areas had no human fear avoidance. They weren't afraid of us. They didn't know what we were. And this is not theory. This is documented. The early European explorers that arrived in the Americas, they talk about being able to walk up and touch animals. They could walk up and touch a Stella sea cow that was sitting on the beach. It wasn't afraid of them at all. You try that with any of the African animals. No way. Even in Australia, when they talk about the dodo, why did they call it the dodo? Because it didn't run. Yeah. They say that they call it that because it couldn't fly. Well, we don't call the ostrich that, but the reason the dodo is extinct and the reason we call it stupid is because you could just walk up, pick it up and put in a frying pan. But that's because it didn't know what a bipedal hunter was. So I think this is interesting from the perspective of, were we meat priority eaters or were we plant priority eaters? And my version of that is I think we've largely been meat priority eaters that have eaten plants opportunistically and eaten them out of necessity, but not out of priority.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, look, even if you look at nutrient density, the nutrient density of animal protein and not just meat, like when it comes to organs and whatever the case may be, you can't get it out of plants. I mean, you're talking like bushels of plants.
And an elephant eats for 23 hours of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just not practical. But I'm with you. We're pretty much on the same page here. Let's talk a little bit about this whole idea of metabolic freedom, metabolic sovereignty. This feeds into the parts of your program, and you've mentioned it a few times here, seasons. Yeah. And you're not necessarily talking about seasonal eating, but you kind of are because the seasons match up, right? Yeah. They kind of do. But, and it's interesting because I never thought of spring the way you describe it until you just described it off camera. But when you said it, I was like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense.
So as a recap, we started calling it spring because we were already using the seasonal metaphors, but also keto was a bad word back then. So we just didn't want our clients to we didn't even tell them they were going into ketosis. We just said, you're going into spring.
You might feel a little crappy for a couple of days, but you'll be fine.
Exactly. Here's and we call it, we talk about that. It's like the onboarding process for spring, but let's do this in two different ways. First,
okay.
People might be confused by you saying, well, you're talking about seasonal eating, but you're not, but you are, but you're not. So when I talk about seasonal eating, I'm not talking about eating in accordance with the seasons for the place you live, because you are, in most cases, an immigrant to the place that you live. And so the seasons where you live are largely irrelevant to your metabolism. Where the metabolism that we're talking about is the sapien metabolism that did 99% of its evolution in sub-Saharan Africa. Those are the seasons we're talking about. And so our ancestors evolved 3 very distinctive metabolic modes matched to Mother Nature's whim. So Mother Nature came along and said, you know what? It's drought now. No rain for you, and no plants as a result. And the hunting's going to get really tough because, and you're going to go into serious calorie deficiency now. And so our body's like, what are we going to do about that? A lot of us, and by the way, many of us died. Starvation is a serious cause of death, right? But some of us evolved the ability to put on a little bit of fat that would help us to get through that season. And also, all of us evolved the ability to burn our own internal proteins, to scan our body and look for dysfunctional amino acid chains and dead skin cells and collagen floating around and old proteins, and break them up and burn them. Just like, if you and I were trapped in a cottage somewhere in the north of Norway and we needed heat, we wouldn't burn the grand piano. We'd burn the broken picnic table, and our body does that same thing. Of course, we all know it.
You might eventually burn the grand piano.
If you starve long enough. Yeah. But, if you're fasting for in that 3 to 5 day window, you're not burning the grand piano. You're not burning your muscles. You're burning old, sick, gross. And I'm of the opinion that this is the most cost effective and most effective anti-cancer protocol that anybody could take 100%. On. Done deal.
Yeah, we're talking about autophagy here. Yeah. We're talking about tapping into this built-in mechanism to take out the trash.
Exactly right. Then the skies open up and the rain starts thundering down in spring, and a bunch of interesting things happen. Immediately plants start growing. Immediately, like within days. They've been waiting, right? But also what happens is all of the prey animals, all of them have their babies on pretty much the same day. It's such a miraculous feat of Africa that they have, like, say, a 6 or 8 week breeding cycle, but then they all drop their babies on the same day. And this is an evolved response to predation, because if they had their babies at the right time, according to gestation, then they would all have their babies, like some of them on day one, and the lions would eat all of them. And then the lions would eat all, and the jackals and the wild dogs and the hyenas. But instead, they drop them all on the same day. So the lions are full, and it gives the babies an extra 2 days to find their legs and get their speed. It's a super smart timing thing, right? But it also speaks to phenomenally improved hunting conditions. And so we go into spring, and now we're focusing on maybe some plant material. There are green shoots and things around, but mostly we'd be focusing on the plentitude of healthy, great proteins that are floating around and that are available. Then some berries start popping up, and they advertise brightly because they want you to eat them. They want you are the transportation system of the berry. And so now you're moving into summer, and your pancreas wakes up and goes, hey, what's going on? I've been making glucagon for all these months, but now I have to make insulin. And this switch is easy. The body makes this switch happen super quickly. Nobody needs to train themselves for carbohydrate flexibility, because the minute you put sugar in, your body treats it as a toxin and wants to burn it out immediately. So the pancreas starts pumping insulin, and you move into summer. Then the root vegetables start coming. There's lots of honey. The bigger fruits are available. You move into fall, and you start developing low-grade insulin sensitivity, and you start gaining weight. And if you didn't, you wouldn't survive the winter. So
isn't there a theory out there that in those ancestral populations, you almost would see people being pre-diabetic by the time winter rolls around?
It's, there is.
What we would define as
what we would define. There's a nice thought exercise about that. John Gray, who wrote the Mars Venus books, is a good friend of mine, and we used to go up and do retreats at his ranch up in Mendocino. And one morning, his late now wife, Bonnie, a wonderful woman in my life. She and I were out for a little walk outside, and we stumbled upon a pile of bear poop, and it was fresh, man. And how do I know it was fresh? Because it was steaming.
That's fresh. That's fresher than anybody wants.
It's a lot fresher than you want. First, you scan around, make sure that you're like. Exactly. But then we noticed there were a lot of like broken branches and berries. Some partially chewed, some unchewed, and what have you. And so I want you to, if you think about that, what's going on is we were there in the fall. The berries are everywhere. The bears are eating as much honey and berries as they can. They're eating the salmon that are running. They're loading up and gaining weight. And what would happen to that bear if we trapped them in Mendocino Fall for 3-4 years? Obesity and diabetes.
Right. So that they never went through the hibernation process. And,
Obesity and diabetes are not diseases. They're repetitive stress injuries that result from getting trapped in the wrong season.
Yeah.
And so now when we understand that we evolved to have that, now there are some nuances. The body is not very good at switching back to spring. It doesn't believe you at first. It's very good at switching into sugar, but it's very hard to switch out, which is why, you and I talked about this. Like you put people in keto the first time and they get the keto flu and they get the rash because there's this onboarding process. But
there's no carb flu.
Well, there is. It's called diabetes.
Yeah, well, but I mean,
it just takes longer, right?
Exactly.
But the reason this is really fascinating is that when we talk about this idea of, say, like metabolic sovereignty, the ability to choose it's first step is understanding that these 3 modes exist. Second step is understanding that they are necessary. Each of them is important. And then the third step is realizing that Mother Nature no longer controls this for us. And therefore, we're going to need to be conscious and we're going to need to trigger it ourselves. We're going to need to make a decision to move between the metabolic modes. Once we've gotten to that level, we now move to this area that you might call sovereignty, where you now begin to realize that you can optimize your metabolic state for whatever is going on in your life in that moment. And some good examples that I like for this is that, like, if somebody's preparing to do a long endurance race, then what I would recommend there is that they want to be doing that race in spring. They want to be in fat burning mode. Now, they may well have wanted to eat some carbs, good, healthy carbs. We're not talking pasta and garbage, but they wanted to eat some good root vegetables and stuff, maybe a few days before the marathon. Why? They're going to put on a tiny little bit of fresh fat, and they're going to get some glycogen in there, but then they want to switch back to spring or back to keto. And then they'll run
or somebody, don't they do like this little hit of carbs sometimes in the last sprint? At the end of the race?
My feeling about that is they only need that if they're not properly fat adapted.
Okay, so that's a good point.
In 2000, I ran the London Marathon, and I ran it with 2 friends of mine, and they did the whole like carb loading for the week before and so on, and I didn't. I moved into spring, and I ran the marathon much easier than they did. And when the marathon was over, I went to work the next day. They took 3 days off to recover. If you burn sugar, you're destroying everything. It's really tough. So you only need that hit of sugar if you've been relying on dietary blood sugar. But you carry 2,000 calories of blood sugar. That's not enough to run a marathon. That's why you hit the wall. No. But you carry 200,000 calories of fat. You can run 6 marathons, right? When you're fat adapted like that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And those ketones just keep on giving, right? They're anti-inflammatory. They make you more efficient with oxygen, like all
better mental clarity, better mood management, the whole deal.
I find humans, we're addicts by nature. People get addicted to being in keto all the time. They get addicted to being most people get addicted to carb burning most of the time. We tend to be, not everybody, but so many people tend to be creatures of extreme. Like I, as a nutritionist, have had to talk people out of fasting too much sometimes. Right? Yeah,
there's some fascinating stuff that goes on with that. There's sort of a baby bathwater thing. It's like, well, if it worked once, it works all the time. Here is how people get trapped in veganism. And by the way, look, we have thousands of vegan clients, and we encourage them to be flexitarian rather than vegetarian. We encourage them to do that, but we'll support them. You can do it. You're going to have to supplement. You're going to have to eat an unconscionable level of beans and legumes and stuff. You're going to have to find a way. If you're willing to slip a few eggs in there, you could change the game a lot. So we do what we can. We don't shame them. We don't tell them they can't do it. But I know a lot about this because I went through it myself, and I've witnessed it now with thousands of people. What happens is most people are eating the standard American diet, and then one day they end up at a retreat and they end up at, drinking wheatgrass. Oh my God. They go and get told all this stuff. And then what happens is their allergies go away. they lose a bunch of weight. Their autoimmune condition initially, improves, and so on. And they made many changes during that time, but only one of those changes changed their identity. Right? When you give up wheat, you don't become a non-wheatitarian, right? So they gave up wheat and they gave up this and that. But the one thing that they changed invited them into a cult. It invited into the cult of vegetarianism or veganism, a cult that is basically bent on making sure animals are never born. I mean, that's the only way to stop the whole thing. But what happens is, because their health turned around so dramatically, at the same time they changed their identity, they assumed that the identity shift is what caused the health, when it was a million other things they changed as well. And so, and so you're seeing the same thing. Somebody goes on a fast and they feel amazing. Now they're fasting to the point of damage. Or somebody, goes on a fruit fast, which I'm okay with a fruit fast. I think it can be great. It's fun, and it can have a sort of cleansing
intervention.
Yeah. But don't live that way. And that's really, when I say Mother Nature doesn't control us anymore, that's really, it's not simply that Mother Nature doesn't control it. It's that the food industry has hijacked it as well. And so that's why we do have to bring our consciousness in, and we have to say, if Mother Nature is not going to do the job and the food industry is going to hijack the calendar, then I'd better bring my consciousness to the table, and I'd better move my metabolism in accordance with my design if I want to live a long time. And by the way, I get this all the time. I'm sure you do too, but I've spent a lot of time with the Hadza people in East Africa, and one of the last true hunter-gatherer populations on Earth. And then people always say, "Yeah, but Eric, they don't live very long. We live so much longer." Okay, fair point, but not totally a fair point, because they have an infant mortality at 50 to 80%, and that a childhood mortality of 50 to 80%. So if you average out, if you get 2 people living to 65 and the rest of them didn't make it past 5, if the average is 65, and how old did the other 2 have to get to lose that many?
Right, to balance out
they do live, they can live quite a long time, but they also live in the hardest conditions ever. I mean, they really do. There's no retirement home. There's no taking it easy. But the bigger issue is this. My argument is, we're not living longer. We're being kept alive. And we're being kept alive in the very same way that the Frankenstein monster was brought back to life. Most people, their last 20 years is not living longer. It's being kept alive, Frankenstein style, with technology and electricity and tubes and pills and surgeries. And I think that's the big shift that I want to see. I want to see people living longer, not being kept alive.
Here's a thought. What if your skin could fight aging instead of just accepting it? If you're tired of the usual moisturizers that only seem to go skin deep, you have got to try Youth Firming Body Cream. This isn't just your average lotion. With ingredients like NAD+, Apex, and Celvio, and spermidine, it works from the inside out to restore your skin's vitality. Think firmer, smoother skin on your neck, chest, legs, arms, basically wherever aging shows up. It clears cellular waste, boosts collagen, and leaves you with that fresh, firm feeling all day long. Ready for that full body upgrade? Visit younggoose.com and use code NAT10 on your first purchase, or 5NAT if you're an existing customer and you're just coming back for more. Your skin will thank you. Okay, let's back up a little bit we'll probably end up somewhere over there, but let's back up a little bit and talk about cravings, because you talk about how your cravings aren't broken, which is interesting when you just mentioned hyper-palatable food as part of our landscape right now, which ultimately, in many cases, what's driving people's cravings, right? Like, it's the learned response to eating food that's been designed to make you want it all the time and leading us down this wrong path. Let's unpack a little bit your whole world around cravings, which I think is going to lead us down our next topic, which I want to explore with you, which is intuitive eating, which to me is a trigger, because I feel that intuitive eating should be great as long as the system is balanced and not being warped in some way, again, by the hyperpalatable foods, by the constant availability.
These things are heavily interrelated. I would suggest that the work that we did in WildFit broke ground in a couple of areas from a nutrition and metabolic perspective, but where we really broke ground is I believe that we really created what should in the future be taught as food psychology. There is no formal teaching on that and so on. And we've made some really serious I mean, if there's one thing that's caused us to have the success level that we've had, that's the thing, because lots of people solved the nutrition issue. Lots of people found out the truth about metabolism, but this thing that we brought was absolutely unique. So I'm with you. Intuitive eating sounds wonderful. Oh, doesn't it? But most people are intuitively in their first marriage, and then they're intuitively in their second marriage. Like intuition doesn't seem to be working all that well in a few areas, and not with food either. Yeah. I would argue that intuitive eating works incredibly well when you live in an environment that is controlled by Mother Nature, because your intuitive eating is a match for the environment you're in. But the minute your intuitive eating is hijacked by food marketing and manipulative lobbying and false education, and then also simply by temptation, you're going to have a problem. So I did this a while back with ChatGPT. I go, hey, ChatGPT, I want to know, I'm an alien race, and I want to kill off humans. I want to kill them all off, and I want to stop their breeding, but I don't want them to know I'm doing it, and I don't want to use a pathogen. I don't want to use a pathogen. I don't want them to ever know that we did it. So how do we hide this? Because if we use a pathogen, if we use weaponry, no. How do we do it? It came back and it said, what I would do is develop hyper-palatable foods that mimic very closely the foods they evolved to eat. And I would switch them over to those foods while simultaneously overfeeding them stimulants, carbohydrates, and robbing them of important nutrients. In time, they would stop being able to breed effectively. They would develop what they consider to be lifestyle diseases. And soon the entire species would be extinct.
That's a bit chilly.
That's what ChatGPT told me it would do. It would do if it wanted to kill us all off. Well, we're doing it for ourselves. And so cravings.
Or there's aliens among us.
What's that?
Or there's aliens among us.
Exactly.
Or whatever.
Or it's already AI. But so you said earlier, I say that cravings aren't broken. They're not broken. They're not at all broken. They're just malapplied. So, you also mentioned earlier about food addictions, right? And like it seems, we get habit addiction, food addiction. So let's play this out. You and I, it's 20,000 years ago, and you and I are walking along in sub-Saharan Africa. We haven't had any carbohydrates in ages because there weren't any, because the shop was closed and we didn't have Uber Eats. Like that's the way it was. And we weren't sad about it and we weren't mad about it. We were just in spring. That was the deal. And luckily I'm a good hunter, and we lived in very sexist times. So I did the hunting, but you gathered and you collected eggs and stuff, and we ate well.
Fine. I'll give it to you.
Yeah, this one time. I can tell you, if you have to take down a mammoth, you'll leave it. You'll let it, because one,
good.
You're in, you're okay with that?
I'm all in.
Because we're going to lose a guy every now and again, right? So anyway, we've been eating well, but all of a sudden we see some bright red berries, and we're excited about that because we remember them. Why do we remember them? Because emotions are the indexing system of the brain and the indexing system of geographic location. When you have a deeply emotional experience, you remember where you were and when you were.
Yeah.
So we see the berries and we have an emotional response. You go, oh, it's them again. And we walk over and we eat some of them. Our stomachs are quite tiny, by the way, only about the size of our fists, unless we had a big meal the day before, but they're not. And so we eat like a handful of berries and we feel good. We feel fine with that, and we start walking away from the tree. In the meantime, our insulin starts pumping, our pancreas starts pumping insulin to bring the blood sugar back down because we've spiked heavily. And then now we're left with a little excess insulin and then low blood sugar. And then you turn to me, or I turn to you and go, hey, do you want to go back and get a couple more of those berries?
Yeah. Or
Starbucks or cookies or whatever it is that it is today. Mm-hmm. And so we walk back to the bush and we eat a few more of those berries. We're releasing serotonin and dopamine, and we even start releasing endorphins from the whole experience. Endorphins, of course, acting like a painkiller so that we don't feel our stomach distending. Because it is really important to our survival that we eat as many of these damn berries as we can fill in, because if we don't, we're not going to survive the winter. And so what happens all of a sudden is, where we yesterday had no cravings for berries at all, now we have cravings. We start breeding different gut bacteria. We know there's a gut bacteria brain connection. Our parliamentary digestive system, or our digestive Congress, starts voting for berries, right? Where it was voting for mammoth, it's now going, no, man, I want more berries. And by the way, with that, we also start becoming emotionally not as balanced, because we start feeling scarcity about the berries. And we start fighting over them to some degree. We start getting everybody's grumpier when their blood sugar is fluctuating, right? And that's again a survival technique, You become a distinctly different human being when you eat carbohydrates, a different psychology. You are in truth a different human being when you eat carbohydrates.
Interesting.
And so now you have an insatiable craving for more sugar. And that craving, our ancestors never needed consciousness about that. They never needed to go to Etihad Airlines where you can find my 7 days to quit smoking program on the airline. They never needed to go find that. They didn't have to do it because Mother Nature came along a few months later and said, berries are out of season.
And we're done.
Yeah. And you were mad about it and you tried to find them. And then by about the third day, the carb craving was gone. So where this is so important to understand is that the cravings are not bad. They're not broken. They're doing exactly what they were supposed to be doing based on the environmental conditions. Unfortunately, the environmental conditions have changed so much that the cravings are now a death trap. So that's where we now have to have consciousness about how we address those cravings.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible. And I think this is where the crux of your program lies.
Yeah, it's in there. There's
millions. There's so many people have built a better mousetrap when it comes. Here's what you're going to eat. Here's when you're going to eat it. They're cycling people in and out of ketosis. But as a nutritionist, I kind of stopped coaching after a certain period of time because I was like, I can't do the work for you. And it's you in your program. What you've done is you've added that piece of helping people to address the psychology, like your own head. Like you got to flip your own switches to allow yourself to do the thing.
This is important. What we've just described gives people kind of a view of learning about it, but it doesn't show the change in their body. And I want to give you a great story about this. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine did our program many years ago, and she came on one of the graduation calls. She'd lost 40 some odd pounds, and she was in her 40s. So you can imagine from a self-esteem perspective, she right-sized herself back to college weight. She wrote to me earlier and told me how grateful she was. She was wearing a 2-piece swimsuit for the first time since she was 19 years old. I know people go, oh, that's just so shallow. I don't care, man. Like whatever gets you healthy, I'm with. And I think you should have deep goals and shallow goals. I have them too. I catch my triceps in the mirror.
It reflects. That's the thing. It reflects health.
It does.
What's the most aging thing that we eat?
What's crazy these days is you're not allowed to fat shame somebody, but you can thin shame them all day long.
Oh, yeah. So, that's a whole different topic.
Yeah. Yes. But now she's on this graduation
so 40 years old, drop 40 pounds. Yes.
She's on the graduation call and she says, I am having one problem though. And I go, what is it? She goes, I've got this craving. I go, what is it? She goes, icing. I just got this craving for icing, and I said, oh, and I'm on a call with like 400 or 500 people. So I want to be expedient with her. I don't have an hour. I want to so I know what this is about. I think I'm like, oh, I know what it is. You used to bake cakes with your mom and, you guys made homemade icing and she let you lick the bowl and you've got a love connection. She goes, no, my mom got icing out of the can. Oh, okay. You better tell me then. She goes, yeah, I would be upstairs. I'd hear the can opener spinning. I'd come running down the stairs. I'd sneak under the counter. I'd reach up and get a spoon out of the drawer sneakily. And then I would try to feel around from under the counter where the can was. And I'd scoop out one scoop of the icing and then I would steal it. And my mom would usually let me get away with one or two before she caught me and tickled me and cuddled me. And then we would bake together. And I'm like, I see. So can you tell me how your relationship with your mother is today? And tears start brimming up in her eyes. She can't speak for a moment. And she goes, I'm losing my mom to early stage dementia. She's slipping a little bit more and more all the time. And I don't say anything. Good coaching sometimes is listening. And then suddenly her eyes go like this. She goes, oh my God, you don't think I'm craving the icing to try to get close to my mother again? She was done. The craving was gone. Like in that moment, it was like she shone the light on it. She understood it and it was gone. That's the type of work we need to do with our clients. They have created neuroconnections to foods. They've learned that chocolate is an anesthetic to pain. They've learned that wine is an anesthetic to loneliness. They've learned all this stuff. And by us helping them break those connections, they can never go on a diet again. They never need to, because a diet is distinctually, what it really is trying to exercise willpower on a daily basis to not eat what you really want to eat. What if instead we can get you to a place to understand why you used to want it and get you to not want it anymore? Mm-hmm. Everything changes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. That's beautiful. And and sometimes all it takes is seeing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it takes more. Sometimes it takes full on pattern interrupt. Yeah. And, I've had people come on calls and they're like, I just don't know. I feel like eating a chocolate cake. I'm like, do you have one in the house? Yeah. Bring it to the call. And we go through the process of, because I'm sure you've seen this with your clients. I'm sure you've experienced it yourself. There's a food that you really don't want to eat too often, but every now and again you make a treat of it. But does the second bite taste as good as the first one? Generally not. And what about the third one? Like, think of popcorn. People go get popcorn at the movie. They eat their popcorn. The first mouthful, it's great. The second mouthful, then after that, it's just this salty mess that they're scarfing down while they're watching the movie. And what a lot of people don't realize is that the junk foods that they treat themselves to, they're only enjoying about 10% of the process. Then they're stuffing the rest of it in their face anyway. And then they're dealing with the blood sugar crash afterward. And when we can show them that timeline really viscerally, it's like, I'm not doing that anymore.
Right. Yeah, well, we're learning to stop. That's interesting. Yeah. It's funny. I have a check on chocolate. If I can have one piece of chocolate, I'm a happy girl. Whereas you have people who will not rest until every piece of chocolate is gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And understanding that about yourself is a big
knowing
big thing. I get to have chocolate in the house.
There you go. Knowing which are what we call cascade foods that are likely to cause a cascade. But then also you then have two approaches. One is you can examine where the cascade comes from, and sometimes you can break it. And then other times you go, you know what? I'm not going to break it, and I'm just not starting with that. And I'll give you one good example. I travel a lot, and then people come up and go, oh my God, this dessert, Eric, it's amazing. And what is it? Well, it's this, thing with the sugar and the this and that. And I go, and it's just to die for. And I go, well, no, thank you then. Well, why not? And I go, well, why would I want to eat something that tastes so good that I will then miss it by not eating it? Right now, I don't know what I'm missing. And then they always laugh and they go, I wish I did that the first time. Well, that's how I'm not addicted to heroin.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's brilliant. And just apply it to food. So if you really love someone, you won't share your most favorite thing with them.
I'll tell you.
Or dessert. Anyways, share your favorite steak, but not dessert.
Yeah. But that's such a big one too. You've seen The Matrix?
Yeah.
And so how the agents could take over other people, they could suddenly the agent, there's a cop standing there and agent could become the cop. We have a metaphor for that. And that is that the food industry has agents and they can take over your family. Like, you can be sitting there talking with somebody who you think loves you, who you've grown your whole life. And suddenly you realize you're not talking to that mother that you thought you were, that sister or that friend. You're talking to an agent of the food industry. And this is how they're going, but I made it for you with love. I made it just for you. I'm like, come on, you got to live a little. And you go, oh my God, I'm not talking to somebody who loves me. I'm talking to somebody who's trying to kill me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's, and they do think they are doing it out of love, but it's all kind of a little twisted on its axis, if you will.
Well, hold on for a second though. I know they're doing it.
Let's define love.
I know that too.
Yeah.
But there's another reason they're doing it. And it's a little dark. When you choose not to have it, you make them feel a little weak.
Yeah.
So they need to get you to have it so they can feel good about having it themselves.
I see that with wine a lot.
Yeah.
Like and there is there's definitely a movement away from alcohol right now, but the people that are entrenched in it, man, they have those bottles in an iron grip and they are so unhappy.
I've got a funny story for you about that. So I've not had alcohol since I was 19. I was early on the moving away from alcohol thing. I never had a problem with it, but relatives of mine did, and I just didn't want to go down that road. But funniest thing happened is I was about, I don't know what year it was. The year Sideways came out. And, Sideways was the big wine movie, right? And so a friend of mine called me and he goes, listen, we're getting a new jet. Do you want to go to Hawaii this weekend? We're leaving in 2 hours. I'm like, shit, okay. So we go off to the terminal. I pack a quick bag. We get to the terminal. We fly on a private jet very spoiled, but it was...
Friends of Tony.
Sorry?
No, I said friends of Tony know people with jets.
There you go. So off we go. And
it's that whole proximity thing.
Yeah, exactly. If your number is in their phone, it helps a lot. So anyway, we get to Hawaii and we stay on Lanai and we go to the Four Seasons, and then they hand out the menu, and the menu has the most incredible food, but there's no prices. There's no prices in the menu. Only my friend His menu has prices in it, but nobody else can see the prices. And it's a way where the very wealthy say, look, I know you're looking at the prices and I don't want you to. I want you to order whatever you want. It's a very charming thing, right? You go and they go, I have no idea. Yeah. I'm just going to order. Anyway, then all the wine snobs start talking about wine. And I have no interest in this at all. They're smelling it, they're tasting it, they're smelling it some more. They're talking about hints of sandalwood in the back taste. And I'm like, I don't understand any of this, but I've just seen the movie Sideways. So there's that famous scene in the movie Sideways where I can't think of his name now, the actor, but he goes, if anybody orders a Merlot, I'm leaving. And I think it was Merlot. I can't remember. It's a long time ago.
Whatever.
And then so I'm at the table and I go, look, all this wine talk is fine, but if anybody orders a Merlot, I'm leaving. And I say it deadpan, just like in the movie, right? So they're like, why? And I'm quite good at movie dialogue. Again, I can't do it as well as I could then, but I just did his dialogue. I go, Merlot, I have no respect for that grape. You can grow it like a weed. I want a grape that's delicate, that requires thought, that requires real attention and care. I don't want that. And I did the whole thing and nobody ordered a Merlot. But what made it priceless was nobody had seen the movie yet because it had just come out. Over the next 2 weeks, all of them called me when they went to go see the movie. Go, you bastard. Anyway.
You robbed us of our Merlot experience.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Killing people with love, I guess, is that thing. What's the most consistent emotional pattern you see in people who struggle to change? Is there one thing that you see more often than other things? I mean, there's lots of reasons why people can't change.
Yeah, I at this stage, I mean, we've worked with, I don't know, 150,000 direct clients and many others digitally and what have you. And I've seen lots of patterns. I wouldn't say that there's one, but I would say that one very prolific one is the need for immediate progress. And so what happens is that somebody goes on, say, a diet, and the pain and discomfort level relative to the payoff doesn't make for good economics. And so the average person can only stay on a diet for 7 days because they've had so much pain by day 7 and not enough payoff by day 7 that they just can't maintain it anymore. And so our programs use a methodology called behavioral change dynamics. And one of the rules of behavioral change dynamics is you create two of the rules that are really important. One is minimum opportunities to fail. And the other one is become the Sherlock Holmes of progress. So the challenge is that most people go on a diet with a singular outcome. They go on that diet. And of course, the most common singular outcome is to lose weight these days. That's the most common, why I'm going on a diet reason. And so the trouble is that, you can lose weight in 7 days, but almost entirely it's water and then leading into inflammation. It's not real weight loss in that 7-day window, really. And so if you're in a lot of pain, and that is to say, you feel like you're missing out, you feel like your people around you are enjoying themselves, you feel like your life is boring, and equally you're not seeing any progress, then you're going to lose motivation and you're going to give up. What we have done is really help people to get to terms not simply with their singular outcome, but to get in terms with all of the variety of outcomes that could lead there, and in particular, their end-of-life outcome. And this is really fascinating. You see, if you say, I want to lose weight, there's no emotional engagement to that. But if you say, as a grandparent, I want to be able to wrestle with my grandchildren on the floor and then get up without the shame of having to ask my son to lift me to that's so emotionally engaging that you start creating enough pull, right? So that's the first part, is create enough pull. And then the second part is to really become the Sherlock Holmes of progress. So that is to say that if somebody gets through day 3 and somebody offered them chocolate and they resisted it easily because of one of the mental exercises, you get them to celebrate that. You get them to celebrate in a great way. But then equally on day 15, when they eat a chocolate bar that they, quote, weren't supposed to, let's say, they come on the call and they go, Eric, I don't know what happened. I just, they brought them to the office and the next thing I know, I was eating it. I didn't even notice. Now, if they're at a Weight Watchers meeting, I don't know. I mean, if they're at a dietary meeting, then it's like, oh, really? Well, that's okay. You were weak. You should think twice next time. I don't do that at all. This is you go ahead. Tell me you ate a chocolate bar. You're shameful. You're embarrassed about it. Tell me you ate a chocolate bar.
Oh my God, Eric, I don't know what happened. I mean, It was there 1 minute. And then when I opened my eyes again, all I had was the wrapper and the bar was gone.
You did? That's amazing. That's phenomenal. Okay, Natalie, wait. Okay, I'm so excited about this. I'm so excited because where we're going to learn a lot about your psychology is when you break outside of your own rules. So you didn't want to eat it, but you ate it. That means there's a learning opportunity. So tell me, what exactly happened? You saw it, and then what did you think? And then, by the way, when you put it in your mouth, did it taste as good as you thought it was, or did it become this automatic thing? And also, how did you feel 20 minutes later? And you bam, bam, bam. And what you do is you bring unbelievable micro-focused consciousness to the slip they've made in the most positive way, and you create pattern interrupt.
Nice.
And so they didn't. So we have to do that type of thing incrementally. And then the next time they go, you know what? Jimmy brought chocolates to the office again, and I couldn't do it. I even wanted to, and I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Now you get progress. Good. And it's those micro progress steps that keep them locked in.
Well, and I think what's amazing about it, you mentioned this earlier in a different way, we're all about instant gratification, and you're not going to get that physical change as an instant gratification. And you said this at the beginning of the podcast, weight loss or body, whatever you call it, you have a really good term, right weighting
right sizing
your body. Right sizing your body, right sizing your body is an outcome of changing your lifestyle and the way that you do things. Yeah. And so that's going to take time no matter what. And definitely with the clients I had who were successful, it's the people who stopped obsessing about that endpoint, but looked at what they were doing now. Right? Because we are, as humans, we suck at waiting for anything, especially now.
What's so crazy about this is that it takes a decade or more to create obesity and type 2 diabetes. You can't do it fast. The body doesn't really want to do all that. It wants to do it a little bit to survive the next winter. It takes a long time. And the joke is, like, take a look at something like type 2 diabetes. In the 1970s, it took 40 years. Like, nobody under 40 had type 2 diabetes. Now the food system has changed enough that we can create it in 15 years, but it still takes 15 years to create it. But
you got 10-year-olds with type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, it's getting faster and faster. But it can be turned around in 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah. That's unbelievably fast. And by the way, without getting overly political about what's going on in America these days, all I'm going to say is that I'm just going to point out that one of the reasons that it's very difficult for governments to have any kind of positive impact on health, let aside the lobbying and the regulation and all the garbage, the FDA being paid for by the food industry and whatever, but drug industry, if we let all of that stuff go, just think of it this way. In order for a government to make significant enough changes in the population to improve cancer, they're going to have to do some unpopular things during their elected term that aren't going to reap benefits for 20 years. So it's never going to happen. Yeah. But diabetes, like, I'll tell you, if RFK, if he's smart, he starts focusing on diabetes, they can move that number inside one electoral term. Inside one electoral term, right now, America spends almost as much money on diabetes as half the defense budget. It's insane. It's incredible. Yeah. And it's a disease that can be turned around so quickly that they could turn it around in a measurable enough way to guarantee the next election. Again, I'm not saying who I think should be in government. I'm just talking about the politics of it.
It's almost the low-hanging fruit on the health landscape, which, as a downstream effect, will positively affect cancer rates, will positively affect cardiovascular.
I mean, isn't diabetes the number one risk factor for heart disease, cancer?
No, but it's the gateway. Yeah. It's the gateway to cognitive decline, to cardiovascular disease, to all of those things. So to your point, it would be a really nice way to start, and just start running ads and filling people's feeds with how easy it is. Yeah. And start moving the needle. But okay, couple more questions, and then we're gonna close this up. But I have so many other questions for you. But you talked earlier about people living longer. Like, we don't have. I mean, basically, what you're saying is we have lifespan. We don't have health span.
That's right.
Or too many people don't have health span. What does a functional centenarian lifestyle actually look like through this ancestral lens that really is what you're using as the infrastructure of your whole program?
Well, there's one way to think about it, and that is that in a hunter-gatherer community, at the point in time that you can't walk around anymore, at the point in time that you can't pick a berry off a tree, at the point in time that you can't lift you can't dig up root vegetables and stuff, you're not going to make it. Like, they're communal, but they're also in a sense quite capitalistic. You do things together, but you all have to contribute. So at the point you're not contributing, you're not really going to make it. So what that says to me is that our health span should be marked by mobility. At the end of the day, you should be able to walk and function and lift things right up until the day that you one day say goodnight to your family. Like that, it should be like that. And, if people ask me sometimes, like, what's my, what end of life process would I like? And I only have two versions I haven't quite figured out. One is I might like to, at 118 years old, go for my last walk in the Kruger National Park and take a gun. So I've got one bullet and I can decide whether that bullet buys me 15 more minutes or ends the pain quicker. It's like, I'm done. I'm ready to go. I want to contribute my DNA back to the bush. But that's more of just sort of a cartoon version. The reality is, I like the Stephen Covey method. I never got to meet Stephen, but I know his son. And if I remember the story correctly, the way he described it is Stephen had been in and he was old. And I can't remember how old now, but he'd been in a bit of a bike accident. So he was kind of recovering from that and doing well. But he was in a bike accident, right? Like, think about that. He was mobile. And then at one point, he happened to have the whole family around, big family. I think there were 12 kids or something like that. It was a lot. And he said, "Hey, could everybody come and say goodnight to me?" And everybody came upstairs and said goodnight to him. And he went to bed and he didn't wake up. And he was cognitive and mobile and contributing up until that moment. Too many of us, the last thing we hear is going to be beep, 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 because we're connected to some bloody machine. Too many of us are going to experience our own death through the fog of medication side effects and through the pain of surgery. And like I said, I want to live longer. I don't want to be kept alive.
Nice. Okay. A couple of quick fire questions before we finish up. So what's one nutritional truth you hold that would make most mainstream health practitioners really uncomfortable?
That any nutritional idea, research outcome, fad, principle must be weighed against evolutionary history and evolutionary biology. And if it contradicts it, it must be considered suspect.
Nice. Is there a piece of longevity advice you followed that turned out to be not right?
I was vegan for a few years.
You changed anything dramatically? Change your mind dramatically on anything?
I was vegan for a few years.
That's a good one. And if you're vegan and listening to this, we're not judging you. As Eric was saying, you can be support. You can do it. It's just more work.
Yeah, I should say I was a vegan and I didn't understand what that meant. I didn't take the right supplementation. I didn't make the right considerations, and I ended up anemic and B12 deficient, and it can be done. I'm just saying I did it the fad way. Can't be done the fad way.
Got to do it the right way, 100%. What are the markers or symptoms you personally track that signal you're aging well, aside from blood work? What are your things you check off?
I am not a super, like tests and all that kind of stuff. I do pay attention to body composition. I just, look at my bone density and muscle mass and fat percentage and that kind of stuff. I pay attention to that. But other than that, I base it pretty much on performance. I base it on, and if I can say, I base it on my endurance performance. I'm 55 years old. I can still run a marathon. I can still climb Kilimanjaro. I have good cognitive health. And I have sex drive like I had when I was 25. So all these markers to me indicate that I'm headed in the right direction. And they're more important to me than any chart could show me on a test.
I love it. All right, last one. You've changed so many lives through WildFit, but when you think of your own legacy, what do you want people to remember about how you lived?
My goal as a parent is to raise independent, intelligent, thoughtful, generous, contributing children that absolutely know that they're going to be okay when I die, but that will miss me a great deal. That's how I want to be remembered.
I love that. Eric, this has been a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much for your time and for all your work.
Thank you.
And for all that you do. Let's let people know where they can find you and connect with the WildFit community program. if they're willing to step through that door?
Sure. I'm on Instagram. I manage it myself these days still, which is fun. I do. It's super cool. I like keeping in touch a little. I can't do them all, but I do what I can. I'm at ericedmeads.com, and WildFit is at getwildfit.com. But I'll say this. Evolutionary mismatch is the singular cause, in my opinion, of most of the physical and mental suffering that we deal with here on Earth. Evolutionary mismatch. And I have been working for years to develop a comprehensive assessment of evolutionary mismatch relative to life quality. And so if you go to gapfinder.com, you can do an assessment there. It's currently free. I don't know if it's still free by the time this episode airs, but it's currently free. And it's going to ask you 100 questions about your life. And it's weighing your whole life against your evolutionary design. And then it gives you a very comprehensive report about the steps you can take to improve your health span and quality of life. And so you can find that at gapfinder.com.
Do you think that people from different ethnic backgrounds should eat differently?
That's a really good question. And I'd say it like this, that at the core, we are no different from each other at the core. We require the same vitamins. We require the same minerals. We require the same fatty acids. We require the same amino acids. And at the core, we're good at eating all of the same foods. Now, when it comes to some more, say, Neolithic foods, that is to say, foods that weren't in human consumption before, either because we didn't have access to them or because we've bred them, right? Those are both considered Neolithic. Then in that case, there will be some populations that are somewhat better at those Neolithic foods than others. So for example, Caucasians on the average are better at dairy products than non-Caucasians. 90% of Black people are lactose intolerant, where only 30% of white people are. Now, this should not be taken to say that milk is functional and good or necessary for humans. I'm not making that argument at all.
Conversation.
I'm simply saying that some of us are slightly better. If you come from the Indian subcontinent, you probably have a slightly easier time with legumes and beans, and that's because it's been in consumption there for a long time. It doesn't mean it's preferable to meat, fish, or eggs. It just means you can. So I would say at the essential level, we are far more similar than we are different. And at the customizable level, you know, some people have more sensitivity to this and some people are allergic to that. But there's one more way to really weigh this up. Don't just look at our own history. Don't just look at what we've eaten for 5 million years. Look at what current hunter-gatherers eat when their instincts are aligned with their environment. Look at what our closest living relatives eat, chimpanzees and bonobos, and you will see that they are we could live the chimpanzee diet just about. We could certainly live the hunter-gatherer diet. We could live it. And that is where we're all the same. And we're so the same that our primate relatives are pretty much on that same diet as well. So we start with what's the same. And this is tough because people want to go on the blood type diet and they want to go on the genome tested diet and they want to go on the gut bacteria diet. Look, if you do a microbiome diet check, you go to, and I'm a big fan of Viome, by the way. I love Viome, and Naveen's a good friend. He and I have had some heads up fights across the table. We are well capable of debate. But one of the points that I've always made is that you do and they, by the way, now add genetic testing, but if you had a gut biome test to try to figure out what you should be eating, should I not point out that a gut biome test tells you what you have been eating?
Yeah,
not what you should be eating. And your gut biome would then naturally evolve when the season changed, which is why when somebody first switches to, say, what we call hunter spring or a temporary period of time in carnivore, at first their digestive system doesn't like it. It doesn't mean it's bad. It means it takes a few days to breed new gut bacteria. And then you get to the other side and you're like, why haven't I done this my whole life?
Love it. Thank you. Thanks for accommodating that last question.
All good.
It's been a pleasure, Eric.
For me too. Thanks for having me.
Hey folks, just a quick reminder that all of the information presented in this podcast is for information purposes only. No medical advice, no diagnosing, no treatments suggested here. Before you try anything that you hear about or learn about here, make sure that you check with your medical provider.